So, you're 1800 rated at chess. What opening should you be playing? Well, let's have a look at the Lichess database. We're going to put it on 1800, have a look at all the formats, and see in practice what moves get you the best results. So, you've got the white pieces. On average, you're going to win 50% of the games and lose 46. That's what the average 1800 achieves. But which is the winners and losers in the opening? So your standard e4, everybody knows what's going on here. So let's try and find more of an opening gem that nobody knows what to play against. So the two candidate ones that stand out, c4, the English, it gets you 51%, and starting with knight f3 gets you 52%. And if we scroll down, that's pretty much the best that we can achieve from our opening. So let's start with c4 with the English, and we'll just cover off the main lines so you get a bit of a feel for the positions and what you're most likely going to see. So most people play e5, you play knight c3, you're going to see knight f6, and then what it likes, the top two moves are g3 and knight f3, which are going to transpose into each other. So suppose we'll start with knight f3 in this case. Knight c6 is going to be played, then you go g3. So you're going into this Catalan structure. This is lines that most pros play. Is really solid, and actually in practice, as early as this opening sequence, what are we? 1, 2, 3, 4 moves in. We just run a few more. Bishop c5, bishop g2. Even here, you're winning 53% of the games compared to black's 43. So you've built up a 10-point buffer by choosing to play the Catalan. Even though the engine's saying it's about equal, white's got a slightly favourable position, it's a solid line, and you win loads of games like this in practice. So that's a kind of solid line with c4. The other interesting one is knight f3. And again, let's go through the common responses that you face. So d5. And then you kind of got a choice here, d4, g3, c4. So you can either play g3 and go into another kind of Catalan structure, knight f3, bishop g2. So you're doing the same kind of moves just without the f4 push. e6 is most likely played, and you get an early castles in. So your first moves are basically paving the way to get castled, and this results in you winning 54% of the games compared to 41. So you've not put any pawns in the centre, which kind of is against some opening principles, but in practice this is serving you really well because you're castled super quick. So bishop e7 is faced, and then you kind of got a choice. The engine likes breaking with c4, kind of transposition, and that's exactly what we saw from the other lines. But other ways you can play this a bit slower with d3. What do you play with the black pieces once you reach 1800? So you're going to get e4 most of the time, shock. What should you play in response? So most of the time you're going to win 47%, and lose 49%. But can we get anything better than 47? Can we get something closer to 50? So the line that kind of stands out in the database and that I like as the best response here is knight f6. So you're going into the Alekhines defense, and most likely they're going to kick your knight around for the first couple of moves. So they push the pawn, kick you up to d5, then they play d4. Now, the most common response here, and it still gets you a favourable win percentage, is playing d6. So you're going to win 50% and you're only going to lose 46. So already at this stage you're doing pretty well. But the move that's really interesting here, if we scroll it down, one that jumps out is b5. And you must be like, what is b5? b5 is the O'Sullivan Gambit. And Engine's like, it's rubbish. But Lichess is saying, in practice, it's fantastic. You're winning 54% compared to 43%. And why is it so good? So let's just go down the main line of this. Bishop takes b5, and then you play c5. So you've gambited a pawn on b5. Now you're playing c5 as well, gambiting this one. But white can't take, because if they take here, simply queen a5 check, you're picking up the bishop. If they block with the knight, we just take that off first, and they can't take it, because we'll pick up the bishop. So instead, rather than taking the pawn, we see c4 played most likely in practice. We take on d4. Most common is queen takes back. Now we play this tricky move, knight b4. Obviously threatening to come in to c2 and have this monster fork on all of the pieces. So what does white play to defend against it? They play knight a3. Our queen comes out to a5, threatening a discovery. White plays a very sensible move, bishop d2. Here comes the crazy move. Queen takes a3. You can take the knight, the defender of this square, so that when they take back, you jump in with your knight and pick up the queen. Now, if you get all the way through this into here, you're going to win at 83% of the time. But as you'll kind of see, There'll be some sidelines and variations of why you don't end up in this full line, but this is following the most played moves. You get this amazing line in the O'Sullivan Gambit, so well worth considering against playing against e4. Now, what should you play against the other most common move, d4? So again, let's have a look through here. Most of the time, you're going to win 45% against 50, but what lines give you the best fighting chance? So the Benoni with c5 is pretty good. You're up to 49. I think that's what stands out the most to me looking at it. So c5, and you're going to get d5 pushing on, and e5 is kind of interesting. Gives you probably the most fighting chance. Either that or knight f6. Let's look at the knight f6 line. c4 is played, b5, c takes b, a6. So it's another gambit line. They're going to take it, and you get your bishop out. So this is the Benko Gambit, which is kind of has a lot of its own theory in it, and it's one way to try and fight against d4. And in practice, black does very well here. White only wins 43% compared to black's 52%. And I think this will be because most white players, when they play d4, are not expecting to go into the Benko Gambit. And if you play this every game, you're going to know what's going on a lot more than your opponent. So even though the engine favours white, in practice, this is a really good way of fighting against d4.